Hello, and welcome to Lydia's Wellness Lab, aka my podcast. I'm Lydia, and before we get into everything that we're going to talk about today, I would just like to preface by saying nothing said on this podcast is intended as or should be used as medical advice. If you are in need of medical advice, I strongly urge you to consult with a licensed primary care practitioner. Secondly, I myself sometimes like to just watch specific parts of videos, and in this video I do intend on doing a little bit of an introduction on myself and then on the podcast. So if you would like to skip ahead, I won't be offended at all, and I'll actually put the timestamps somewhere on the screen here so you can go ahead and watch whatever you came to watch. Well, like I said, I did want to start off by doing a little bit of an introduction. Again, my name is Lydia D'Souza, and I am a naturopathic medical student at CCNM in Ontario. For my undergrad, I went to Western University and I did an honors specialization in genetics and then a minor in psychology. And then I actually completed a master's at Queen's University, a Master of Science focusing on aging and health. So I do have quite a few different perspectives through my academics on health. Even before this, before going to CCNM, I was interested and deciding between naturopathic medicine and conventional medicine. So I really have always been passionate about health, and I do feel like I have a good, well-rounded look on it. Not in depth in all areas, but like a little bit, just kind of seeing different perspectives on what health is and what health can be and how health is approached. So during my first year at CCNM, we had a class called Health Psychology where we talked a lot about ourselves and our identity and how we identify, which traits we choose to kind of represent us, etc., etc. And one of the things, even at the beginning of that course, I said and maintained throughout, is that I don't like the idea of just being my career or my education. I think people are much bigger than that. They have much more to themselves than that. And so in this introduction, I just wanted to share a little bit more about myself than just my academics. So I really consider myself a family person. I come from Guyana, and I feel like the culture there is very community oriented. I still have family in Guyana, and I make sure to try and call when I'm free. I still have a relationship with everybody over there, and my family over here has been my village and my support throughout my life, and even now. So family is huge for me, and I think it's huge for health, but maybe that's a topic for another day. Aside from kind of those values, things that I enjoy include moving my body, cooking and baking, and reading. Moving my body this year has been so important because this program has been very stressful, very rewarding, but very stressful. And taking those moments to move my body and kind of refresh and get the blood flowing has been like, I can't even explain how important. Cooking and baking, I'm a food person from all angles, just like I care about health from all angles. I love to eat, and I also love to cook, and I love when I travel to try the foods there. And I think food can also be a huge part of health and a huge part of wellness when you think about like your meal times and who you spend that with, or if that's a break time for you. But again, maybe another episode. And then the last thing that I really enjoy is reading, but I'm sure if you are working in a more academic type field, or if you are studying as well, you know that the amount of reading you have to do for school can be insane. And so I haven't been on my reading game lately, but I am getting back into it. So if you guys have any recommendations for books, I would love to hear what they are. But then I guess we can kind of move into what this podcast is. Like I said, I'm very passionate about health, and I always have been. And I'm really passionate about education as well. Just my family background alone, my parents, they did go to school, they finished high school, and they did a couple college courses, but neither of them did an undergraduate degree. And then my grandparents before them had even less formal education. So when we moved to Canada, it was very important for my parents to make sure that we got through school and we got our undergraduate degree. My parents are very successful, and I don't think you necessarily need an undergraduate degree to be successful, but it does help, and that was important for them. But kind of through that process, I have kind of had to learn how to navigate the education system myself, and I've seen how difficult it can be when you're coming from a background of not having someone to support you along, let alone if you are unable to pursue higher education. So it has been very eye-opening, and it's kind of inspired me as I go through these programs and as I go through school to kind of reflect on what I'm learning and reflect on the fields I'm in and the papers I read and think about, is this actually accessible for other people? We are learning all these great things and doing this amazing research, and then when it's published, it's really only us in the field that can understand it. So I do hope with this podcast to kind of be able to break some of that down and make it easier to understand, and spread it to more people, especially, and this is why I chose health and wellness as my kind of area, because I feel like health and wellness can be very accessible. Of course, there are things that only medical doctors can do, and they're very important, but there are also a lot of things that we can do and take into our own hands, such as our diet and our exercise and our sleep and our stress, that don't get talked about enough, in my opinion, and not enough emphasis is placed on it, and that's because the information isn't always there. It's not always stressed how important these things are. So I would love to be that bridge through this podcast to kind of get that information across. So that was definitely part of why I wanted to start this podcast, but the other major reason is because I feel very strongly about a lot of issues that are happening in the world. There is a lack of education, a lack of access to education. There's a lot of misinformation, especially now that social media is such a huge part of our lives. And I talk about them often, especially with my friends and my family. I think if you ask any of them, they would tell you I do speak about these things often. And they frustrate me greatly, but I've never actually done anything about it. And I figured maybe it's time I should. I mean, I'm getting older. I've learned a little bit. I have a good background in some of these areas. I know how to do my research and I know how to communicate well. Why not start a podcast? Why not try and bring awareness to these things? So yeah, the aim of this podcast is to discuss health and wellness topics, make them more accessible, break them down, make them more digestible, and hopefully help people or empower people to kind of take that information and take control of some of their health and their wellness. I was actually also very inspired when I started this program because I had this idea for a long time, but I was kind of just sitting on it. I talked about it with my parents and they were like, that sounds like a great idea. I even bought this little pink microphone literally last year, quite a few months ago. But I was just kind of sitting on it and it wasn't really going anywhere, even though I had the ideas and I had the equipment. I was just stuck there. But I was going through my program, and there were some people at school who I saw really going after their goals, and succeeding with them and growing with them. And I was like, you know what? I need to get into this. I need to start doing my own thing as well. And that kind of brings me to our topic of perfectionism. So again, I thought the topic of perfectionism would be very interesting because it was something that was holding me back from starting this project among many, many others. I feel like I was coming up with all of these great ideas, and then when I was working through them in my head or working through them physically in a notebook or planning it out or whatever it was, I would always hit these roadblocks because I'd get to a point where I was like, okay, I'll do this and this and that, and then I'd be like, oh, but I don't know after this point what to do, or I don't know what to do if this comes up. And instead of just jumping into it and kind of working through those things, it would be like a hard stop. Okay, well, I can't figure it out, so I'm not going to do it. So when we talk about perfectionism, the definition is a refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. In other words, in more simple words, perfectionism just means you're always striving for perfection. You're not accepting mistakes, you're not accepting shortcomings, you're always trying to do better A perfectionist attitude can be a good thing. It can help push someone to do better, achieve their goals, or perform better than if that mentality was not there. And I think myself and a lot of people in many fields, anyone who's passionate about their job or their career or their academics, really, I think they may classify themselves as a perfectionist. I know I've heard that tons of times in my program, because sometimes a perfectionist attitude kind of drives you to where you need to be. However, perfectionism can become a quote-unquote bad thing when it starts to stop people from trying new things or making them feel inadequate. This type of perfectionism is often characterized by negative reinforcement and a fear of failure. Negative reinforcement, just to kind of explain what that is quickly, refers to doing something or not doing something to avoid a negative consequence. An example of this would be a child doing their chores to avoid being grounded. In contrast, positive reinforcement would be doing something or not doing something to receive a positive consequence. So that would be more like a child doing their chores to receive praise from their parents. But negative reinforcement and a fear of failure, when it comes to perfectionism, kind of go hand in hand, because you are stopping yourself from doing things or trying new things or making mistakes because you're scared of failure. So in the case of perfectionism, negative reinforcement and failure go together in the sense that you are avoiding trying something new, you're avoiding making mistakes to avoid failing. And that's really what was happening to me. Something that had always kind of worked in my favor started to become a huge roadblock for me. I think I would have called myself a perfectionist many times, and I thought it was one of my defining characteristics, that I was always striving for better, I was an A+ student, etc., etc. But then it started getting to a point where I was like, I want to try this new thing, but I don't think I'm going to be good at it, so I just won't try it. Or I want to start this podcast, but I don't have the time for it, and school might get too busy, and then what if I can't do an episode on time? And then I just never did it. So this started as a small problem, but it started to spiral because I stopped going after my goals. I stopped trying to make connections with people, and I was just kind of in this stagnant space. I remember taking some time and talking to my parents about this, actually around the same time that I was telling them about this podcast, because again, I was like, I feel like I have these cool ideas, and then I never actually go for them. And I mean, they told me a typical cliche that I think we've all heard, that there's never a right time. But they're correct. Sometimes there isn't a right time. Sometimes you just have to start things, and there will always be that room for improvement and room for growth. You don't need to start and be an expert right away. And in fact, it's very unrealistic to think that you can start something and be the best at it right away. So you should plan as best as you can. I'm not saying that some attributes of being a perfectionist aren't great, because again, they can help you. But once that planning is over and once you reach that roadblock, you need to jump in. You need to get the experience. You need to make the mistakes. And truly, those mistakes are what is going to get you to that next level, because you will learn from it. This podcast is me taking that leap, and I'm sure in a year it's going to look vastly different than it does today. One thing's for sure, I need a better camera. but if I didn't start today, then in a year, it wouldn't exist. So this topic also reminds me of a Substack post that a friend of mine sent me. It's on the page Let's Try Softer by Sadie Baddies, and the author is Priscilla Aguimen Pina. So in the piece, the author is discussing how they felt as though they were in a functional freeze, which is kind of what I was saying. I felt like I was very stagnant, like I couldn't move forward, like I had plans, but nothing was actually happening. The author walks us through their journey of getting back into the gym through small steps, like beginning walking for 30 minutes and then eventually joining fitness classes and more. A quote that really struck me from this piece reads, "I became devoted to honoring the promises I made to myself and prioritized feeling good from the inside out." The second half of that statement is what really kind of spoke to me, because in contrast to that negative reinforcement and that fear of failure, you can use perfectionism to feel good I'm trying my absolute best right now to feel good. I think this is a fantastic example of taking the pressure off of yourself to do something perfectly or be the absolute best, and just starting your journey from a lens of feeling good, doing the best you can do, and improving with time. You will make mistakes and you will stumble, and that's okay and that's normal. If perfectionism starts to get in your way of even attempting something, it is time to reevaluate, is this helping me or is this hurting me? As I was working on this episode, I remembered when I was younger, my dad often said that sometimes learning about things in theory isn't as important, but jumping into it is the only way to actually master it. And the example that he used was riding a bike. He always said, you can read about riding a bike as much as you want. You can read about how to place your feet on the pedals and how fast you should go and which way you should lean, but until you jump onto a bike and start to ride it, you will never learn to actually do those things. And you are going to get on the bike and you'll probably fall and you'll scrape your knee, but within a day, a couple hours, a couple days, or a couple weeks, you will learn how to ride that bike. So this is me hopping on my bike, and I'm sure I'll fall and I'll scrape my knees a few times, but sometimes that's what it takes to succeed. Sometimes worrying about planning and what can go wrong can only take you so far before it starts to hold you back, and hopping on that bike is the only way through. So that's all I have for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you will all hop on your bikes and pursue your goals, knowing that mistakes will only help you grow in the end, and that a fear of failure and negative reinforcement is not the way to utilize any perfectionist attitudes you may have. I'll be posting monthly on various health and wellness topics, and if there's something specific you'd like to hear about, please comment below. But thank you again so much, and I'll see you next month. All of the research I mentioned, the posts, and anything else will be linked below. So feel free to check those out. And in fact, please check those out because they're all great. And you can follow me on Instagram for more frequent posts if you would like. I'll leave that here. Thank you guys so much and see you next time.